Sie hören eine weitere Ausgabe von Crop FM Spezial. Im Interview Simon Peter Fuller in einem aufgezeichneten Gespräch vom 4. August 2010. Wiltshire, Avebury, Silbury Hill und natürlich die Kornkreise ziehen jedes Jahr tausende Menschen magisch an. Kaum ein Landstrich, der so in Geschichte getränkt ist und an dem so viele Extreme zusammenlaufen. Von verträumten Kornfeldern, uralten Monumenten und geselligen Pubs bis hin zu hochsicheren unterirdischen militärischen Anlagen reicht das Spektrum. Und mitten in all dem rätselhafte Kornglyphen, die jedes Jahr erscheinen. In den Kreisen rund um die Kreise begegnet man auch vielen interessanten Menschen, die sich zum Teil schon seit Jahrzehnten intensiv mit dem Phänomen auseinandersetzen. So traf ich Simon Peter Fuller im Crop Circle Café. Er erzählte mir, dass er Mitglied einer spirituellen Gruppe sei, die seit Mitte der 80er mit den Energien der Landschaft, aber auch den Kreisen und deren mutmaßlichen Erschaffern arbeitet. And if I stop moving, Simon bezeichnet sich als Christus bewusst im Unterschied zu christlich und erzählte mir von der spirituellen Arbeit mit dem neuen Energiegrid, also Energiegitter der Erde, das er geholfen habe aufzubauen. Geboren wurde Horst Wollenberg, so Simons ursprünglicher Name, 1947 in Braunschweig. Mitten in den Nachkriegswirren Deutschlands, ein englischer Bachelor, der in beiden Kriegen gedient hat, adoptierte ihn als eine Art Wiedergutmachung. So wuchs Simon in der Nachbarschaft Churchhills auf, spielte mit dessen Enkeln als Kind und genoss die Erziehung der English Upper Class.
Here we are again, where we started from. When we tried to do things better, we thought they were wrong. Find a bigger star in the sky. I look at it all night and stop asking why.
I had no choice.
Ein wahrlich bewegtes Leben, das Mitte der 80er eine sehr unerwartete Wendung nahm. Doch lassen wir Simon Peter Fuller in dem nun folgenden ca. 73-minütigen Interview einfach selbst erzählen.
Crop FM. Radio aus der Vorstadt der Wirklichkeit.
So I'm sitting here with Simon Peter Fuller, a man who has a very interesting life and who is doing a lot of spiritual work in Marlborough and around the crop circles, but obviously this work seems to go far beyond. So can you tell me a little bit about your life and what happened and how you came to be in this place you are today?
Great, thank you very much indeed. Nice to be talking on your show. My story is a fairly complicated and long one, but we shall make it as brief as we can here. My name is Simon Peter Fuller, and I'm founder of Holistic World Vision, which is a global network for spiritual awakening and expansion of awareness generally. That's been established over the last 20 years worldwide. And my book is called Rising Out of Chaos. In German, the translation is called Der neue Himmel und die neue Erde, through Falk Verlag, so people can follow that up if they wish to, because it's available in the German-speaking world. My life this time round started in 1947 in northern Germany, in Braunschweig, where I was born in a totally devastated and bombed-out city. There was nothing but dust and rubble. I have fairly keen memories of it, which is strange for someone as young as that, but it involved starvation and rickets and very, very difficult start. Fortunately, aged 4, I was rescued by a wealthy Englishman who was looking to make amends for the war. He wanted to adopt a German and take that child to England and raise it in the English sort of what we might call upper class, certainly in a world of money, let's put it that way. So the extraordinary thing was that suddenly, a short plane journey away from those early horrors, I was being brought up in a large English country house as neighbour of Winston Churchill. So I then grew up with Churchill's grandchildren, which was a fairly strange and sudden mix. And then spent the first part of my life going through the sort of classic English upper-class education system in our so-called public schools, which are private, very expensive, and being educated in that way. And life went on, trained as a lawyer, then went into the travel industry with British Airways and travelled the world very, very intensively, until age 35 approximately, when, for a whole variety of reasons, life didn't seem to quite work, or I didn't quite seem to understand the processes, and the classic awakening spiritually came about in Melbourne in Australia, through a variety of mediums and healers and all sorts of people who came together completely synchronistically, not charging any money, but for 4 months working to lift the layers, I suppose, of much confusion, let's put it that way, probably for this life and for many other lives as well. It was certainly extremely intense. The result of it was that in 1985 I came back to London, where I was living before I went down there, and realised that there was no way that life could continue. Had a kind of a vision of a place in the country that I thought would be quite nice to, the sort of environment that I might like. And within 2 or 3 weeks, that vision actually manifested, and I found myself near Avebury in Wiltshire, in the middle of where we're sitting now in Gloucestershire, Wiltshire, Gloucestershire, which is the centre of the crop circle phenomenon. So just a brief summary to bring us to this point. But in 85, I left everything of my old life behind, and London, where I was living, most friends, and just went through a complete shift, I suppose, vibrationally now I look back at it, and started linking with completely different people. So down here in Avebury, in those days in the mid-80s, what we might call the New Age was getting underway. People like Sir George Trevelyan, one of the leaders of the British New Age movement, I became friendly with him and knew him. The lady where I live now, Isabel Kingston, one of the great mediums in this country. So you can see my whole life started to shift into, obviously, the blueprint that I carry for this particular purpose. And bit by bit, it started to build up. A lot of channeled guidance from Spirit about what was happening in this area, what was going to happen. Through Isabel Kingston, as I said, where I live, we had very early interesting information, which none of us in her circle could believe at the time, that your fields will be covered in symbols. There'll be marks made in the crops. All these things were being given by spirit guidance back in about 1985-86, which is before the real phenomenon began.
When you got those these first informations about what is going to happen, did you then already know that this phenomenon is going to manifest in crop, and that there is going to be something like those crop glyphs and crop circles, as we call them, although it's not very accurate to say crop circle?
Yes, she gave fairly clear guidance that it would be manifested in the crops, because it was to be a connection to be available for the whole human race. This is not something that was going to be put into the domain of secret societies or anything like that. This was information from a higher dimensional order to humanity en masse. And where better than to lay it out in fields that were public. Whatever happened afterwards, whatever people's opinions are, this has not been filtered privately into some system of an Illuminati or secret service or anything like that. This is public domain. And those fields were to be used, and we were told that very clearly. At that stage, only relatively simple, genuine circles had been seen by farmers, and I think that goes back for many hundreds of years. Farmers have known of this phenomenon.
I think they were called devil's circles or something like that.
Simply because the church, of course, becomes involved. And anything that's pagan or that is not directly in their book is immediately consigned to the devil. So anything of earth worship or pagan or anything they don't understand or is written immediately as the devil or whatever. Yeah. That's the answer to that.
Is it the same phenomenon? Those circles or those glyphs that appeared 500 or hundreds of years ago and those that appear now, is this the same phenomenon? Is this the same messenger?
As far as I know, it's the same process, because I talked in South Africa when I was there with the amazing Zulu shaman Credo Mutwa, who's a very good friend of mine, and I've worked both ceremonially with him and had long, long discussions with him. And when I was out there in the 90s, I took calendars and various informations to him, sitting in his mud hut kraal, near Johannesburg, and he was just electrified. And he said they have appeared here, also in South Africa, in corn, that long sort of sweet corn. And he's a big fat man. He had to be pushed up a ladder and a pole so he could look down and see what it was all about. And he was very, very excited about the whole thing. And he says that this is a regular phenomenon every time what many call the 12th planet is due back into this solar system. We have a planet on an elliptical orbit, on a vast orbit that comes back through apparently every 3,600 years. And before that comes back, the warning signs are given. That was his take on it, which I found very...
Nibiru.
Yes, Nibiru, yes, exactly. So when that comes back, and one of the Hopi prophecies now, which is to manifest, is that we're already going through the prophecies fast, but one of the final ones is that there'll be something very dramatic happening above us. So whether this is a returning body or whatever it is, nobody can be absolutely certain. There are many, many ideas going on, and it's important to air them all, and then each person can feel their way into the various possibilities. I don't like to be rigid and dogmatic about anything. These are things I've shared with marvelous people around the world, indigenous people who really do understand our times far better than most of us Westerners. They're in contact. They're in contact with the star people, in contact with many. So I have found it's worth listening to the Zulus and the Hopi and the Maori. I've worked over 25 years around the planet now with esteemed elders of many of the indigenous people. The Dogon and all these people, they all have their ideas about the interdimensional connections that we have, and it's very important to understand that. So crop circles, seen from his point of view, was certainly something of heralding of a dramatic change, and there's no doubt that's what they are. They are a language, after all. They are symbols, they are mandalas, As I said to you earlier, when I speak in India about this to university professors, as I have, these people are just amazed and electrified by the images and say, this is our language. We understand this kind of thing. We really feel it inside. So we're being communicated with at a level that we can understand, but not necessarily through the head and the intellect. It's much more felt and much more in the heart. And as I was saying earlier, just seeing the image in front of your eyes of one of these formations is already sufficient for you to download the information that's connected with it, that will probably alter your subtle structures and your DNA and everything else. And that's really what the circle makers are doing.
You said circle makers, and apparently these beings, entities, intelligences, they have been visiting various cultures around the world. You mentioned the Dogon, you mentioned Credo Mutwa in South Africa, and so on. And all of those, and of course in other continents as well, if you go to India, if you go to the Veda, and so on and so forth, and South America, obviously...
Nazca and various.
So... do you think that all of these cultures have been in contact with the same intelligence, or are there different intelligences, different cultures that interact with us here?
That's a good point, because people who were involved in the crop circle phenomenon here from what I call the beginning, and I have the privilege of being part of that. I mean, many have come into this since, in large numbers, and made a big fuss about themselves and called themselves experts. But I must say for myself that together with our local core group of earth guardians in this Avebury Landscape Temple, working since 1985 together under mediumistic guidance, we are very early on in this phenomenon. And in those early days, up till about 1990, the energies were very, very similar. And we feel it was a direct transmission from the people that the medium was in contact with. It was generally very heart-centered, very loving. We all enjoyed ourselves. There was no kind of drama in the area as there is now of people with planks and faking and military and lasers and all this kind of things, all the possibilities that are now going on. And, as you just said, the distinct possibility, in fact probability, that other levels of extraterrestrial consciousness have found this a very useful way to communicate with humanity as well, and have left their symbols. So it's now and we felt it locally. In fact, Isabel, who I work with, hasn't really had a lot to do with the crop circles in more recent years. She's felt it's gone a long way from where it started. Nothing wrong, not a judgment, but just not the energy she was initially in contact with. And I would think from the other side, others have seen that this is a good way of contacting this strange race of humans. So let's join in. So I think there are, yes, and I have felt, and as you probably have as well, very different energies affecting different parts of the chakra systems. You can have headaches, you can have nausea, you can have all kinds of things. You can have a heart chakra open and just lie there in bliss. We've been through all of this.
I've witnessed that. Yeah.
So there you are. So and you'll find that cameras and radio equipment can be very badly damaged by some things. People can go quite crazy. Kids and dogs can, it's powerful stuff and it's strong radiation. So it does now vary. It's quite a mixed bag. But to answer that initial question, yes, those early years seem to have been from a source. And that source is what we seem to have been in contact with in the early days. And they did produce some very beautiful images. But it's gone on from there. A lot of them have become quite sort of mechanistic, have become quite linear. All sorts of strange things have come. We've had thousands. Some say 5,000 in this greater area in these years. So there's a lot to choose from.
And can you describe these original intelligences that contacted your group in 1985 or in the 80s, and that obviously also has been in contact thousands of years ago? Can you describe these intelligences a bit more?
Well, from a personal point of view, it's much more what I would call heart-centered and less mental and mechanistic. Some of the later ones became a very mental kind of, overlighting. I suppose more in line with what might think the greys and certain elements of extraterrestrial are that are very intellectual. what we had originally. We work very much with the Merlin consciousness here on this landscape, and Archangel Michael, and that kind of energy is what Isabel brings in. And the crop circles and the people communicating about them felt very much in that kind of energy. Very kind of loving, concern, cooperative, and so on, and encouraging that kind of energy. What we've had since, and there's been a lot of disruption in the crop circle world, as I was explaining to you the other day. I joke about it. If people come in this part of this part of the world at this time of year, come and join us in World War III. It's everybody kind of on the attack. There are people who think they know better than others. There are huge egos that are being battered. People who think they know it all and condemning others. A lot of really quite nasty stuff, I have to say. I do feel that is inevitable in duality. I believe that a great light such as this phenomenon coming into the world, which is one of our great phenomena, will in the world of duality attract the exact opposite. And one proves the other, as it were. So the brighter the light, the darker the shadow, and they must interact. We have here in these fields, actually in the Alton Barnes fields, where the greatest crop circle formations have ever come, interesting information. The valley where they come is owned by Oxford University. Can you believe that? Oxford University. Okay. Who have absolutely no interest in it whatever and will do anything to discredit it. At the end of the valley are the bankers.
Oh boy.
So we may not get too far into that. It depends how far you want to go.
But as far as you want to go.
But the Rothschilds own land at the end, the Keswicks who own Hong Kong, and they have built an enormous pyramid, which is mainly underground, in the garden of one of the houses, right at the end of the valley, right adjacent to where the crop circles come in.
I heard of that.
Light and dark must battle it out right here, and one is the proof of the other. Now, I've not been in that pyramid. I have friends who have. I've heard what it's all about, what it might be about. I personally, in our group here as Earth Guardians, don't like to get into the detail of the conspiracy, but we like to have a finger on all pulses. Mm-hmm. So nothing comes up behind us and takes us by surprise, which for me is a very good advice to anybody listening to this in life. Don't be in denial. Accept nothing, reject nothing. Stay open. File it away, and you'll be quite surprised when you might need it. So that's how I approach these things, because I don't want to bring my energy into the fear and control agendas on the planet. I'm very aware of them. I send a lot of emails out around the world on a pretty much constant flow of information I get in that I feel is worth passing on, not to frighten people, but to work with people who are beyond that level, actually, who are detached enough to be able to assimilate this information without disturbing themselves too much. But file it away and know it's there. Because my understanding is that what we need now is a critical mass of humanity to be aware. That's all. In Revelations they called it 144,000. The 100th monkey theory, which you probably understand, that monkeys on a certain island of the Pacific scratched themselves in a certain way, and then suddenly a few hundred miles away, monkeys started doing something similar, so that we're all connected and interdependent. So the idea of the critical mass is that it is enough higher vibrational frequency to shift the consciousness of humanity, which is one whole anyway. So that's what we're looking for. We're looking for that critical mass. Not for 51% of the human race. We'll never get that to tip over. Yeah. It's the critical mass that matters. So I'm working in the world of the critical mass, slowly bringing people up perhaps who had doubted things, but who are open enough to be shown, as David Icke says, who will join the dots and see the bigger picture and expand another level, and then see an even bigger picture, and eventually see the whole dualistic drama of fantastic light, which the crop circles herald, being anchored on this planet in many different ways, by many different people, and the inevitable and important opposing factor, which is the exact opposite of love and cooperation and freedom that you and I would espouse, to the total reptilian fear and control at the other end.
Well, you mentioned reptilian. So you think reptilians, now I would put that in quotes because I have no real concept about what they are also engaging in this way here?
Yes, no doubt about it. The reptilian, to make it easier, I mean, David Icke, I think, rather muddied the waters there. He talked about the Queen of England eating babies for breakfast, which I don't think helps anybody. The idea was shape-shifting reptiles. Well, I've had no experience of that myself, but what I can tell you is that the lower back brain, the amygdala, in all human beings has that connection to the old reptilian order, because that's where we have come from in our planetary bodies. Mm-hmm. The level of consciousness being developed is in the prefrontal cortex, in the forehead, where we're beginning to develop slight bumps on the front of the head. That's the new consciousness is coming there. So from the bottom of the back brain to the front of the new brain is the difference we're talking about.
Okay, so reptilian means that you are in you are operating
operating in that back brain. Which is
that's a good that's the first.
It's easier. Yeah. Then you don't have to get too excited about and worried about people who might be shape-shifting in front of you. Most humans are basically, because they've not evolved beyond a certain level, still into, quite naturally, fear and control. If you look at the life of the average human, from the minute they wake up to the minute they sleep, they're in total anxiety, they're frightened, they're trying to protect themselves, they'll attack anything. Fairly reptilian, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, not being a zoologist, but
no, but fairly how they behave, and fairly where we came from. Fight and flight, protect yourself, and so on. Mm-hmm. And there are elements of that level that have refined that to an even greater degree. And then you have your whole Illuminati world of the Zionist agenda of total control of the money, of the media, of health, and all the other stuff that we've got going on as a challenge now in the world. Mm-hmm. Indeed, probably mass extermination of as many of the human race as they possibly can. I have heard that they would like 500 million, not 6.5 billion. And if you look at the things that are happening in the so-called health world, in all the chemtrails, in the poisoning of the waters, of the air, which are all absolutely deliberate, yes, they are well on their way. Well on their way. And this is the final battle that's being joined on the planet, that has been talked of for a long time in prophecy. It's part of all indigenous people. We don't agree on much on this planet, but as I've travelled for 25 years, there is agreement across the entire range of indigenous people, all the religions, and most of the channeling coming in, that this is the 2012 kind of point, is the shift time. And you can argue again, the 2012 people are now fighting as much as the Crop Circle people. Is it going to be 2011 in October? Is it 2012, 21st of December? I mean, there are again male egos battering each other, trying to dominate that drama. But let's not get into specifics. This period, from about now onwards, from where we're sitting now in August of 2010, greatly intensified through the later part of this year, when many, many dramas will occur that will leave people absolutely certain that we're in the times we're talking about, intensifying next year and into 2012, and after that, frankly, I don't know. But we're there. We've arrived.
Yeah. Now, with all those different agencies or groups doing those crop circles, a lot of them being very positive, very heart-centered, some of them also being negative. A question that always comes up, and I also asked that one, Michael Glickman, is, does that mean that some of the crop circles do harm, in your opinion?
That's very difficult to say. They're probably on different agendas, is what one might say, and agendas can vary. So it depends where you stand as to what is harm and what is good for you. You know, some people think blowing up 2 towers in New York was absolutely great, and they danced with joy as they watched them fall. That's been filmed, and we know where they come from. So it depends where you stand, what is harmful and what is good. But in terms of energies and frequencies, yes, they vary. Mm-hmm. So some, as we have with our Illuminati friends, are trying to prevent the shift in consciousness, which is what HAARP is all about. The HAARP radio masts linked all around the world, trying to fry the ionosphere so that the waves of the incoming consciousness for some reason are deflected or don't work. That's their great aim. Chemtrails and HAARP are mixed up together, and as is weather control, because they can control the weather now, they can do the Katrinas and they could devastate places, they can set earthquakes off, they can set tsunamis off. There's enough evidence for all of this. It's all within capacities. And indeed, they've got, from the end of the Nazi era, the best of those scientists who were inventing disc-type UFOs, which are really not extraterrestrial at all. They are man-made. They were taken over by the Americans, and they're seen quite regularly. The last one was over a city in China not very long ago.
Oh, I've followed that a little bit.
Followed that one, and apparently that struck the oil pipes in China, and there's a...
That's the cuckoo clock in the background. We're going to hear that sometime.
Very familiar for Austria and Switzerland. That's very nice. Good. We better let it finish. There we are. Yes, well, it appears on some of the information that there's some controversy about what happened in the Gulf of Mexico, that it is said now by some, the Russians are now putting out, that a North Korean sub attacked that platform. And in return for that, the Americans have now devastated some oil pipelines in China. But I don't know. I'm only passing that on as I've heard from quite reliable sources. And all these things, I keep saying, accept nothing, reject nothing. Stay open, because as we move on, other bits fill into the jigsaw, and then you see, now that was something after all. Okay. So that's all.
As I see it, I mean, could you say that it depends on where you are standing and where you are, if a crop circle is something positive for you, or if it's a rather negative experience, but that could lead to something positive at the end?
Could be, but each person is on their own agenda. You're never going to get into somebody else's skin on this planet. It's all contained within you. All of it. Everything. That's the whole mystery. Everything is not external, it's internal. There's nothing out there. It's all internal. When we stop projecting and find the so-called divinity within ourselves as the absolute rock-solid center, we come into peace and tranquility and beingness and presence and silence, and we move through all this nonsense, all this duality, and we come into the enlightened stage. So it's all within, and each person going into a crop circle will therefore have the energy they've reached and the relationship with the formation, and the results will come as a consequence of that. So I took 23 people into 4 crop circles yesterday, and everybody had different experiences, and we shared them as we went.
And if some of the circles are made by positive agenda, some by negative, can't you then say that in the end they cancel each other out?
Could also be that, but it's still where you as an individual perceive it or experience it, because that's all that really matters in the end. I mean, symbols can be. We know how symbols can be used to subvert. I mean, we understand the whole of the City of London and the banking world, which is controlled there, which is fractional reserve banking and usury, which is the darkest forces on the planet and making us all slaves by the day. They say now 12 families own most of the wealth of the world, because that's what happens with usury and fractional reserve banking. That is all held in place by what you might call negative symbols marked under the Bank of England.
Oh, boy.
Oh, yes. In the square mile of the city, which is still the dominant force behind the negative control of money in this world, which is fast disintegrating in paper nonsense. And Germans listening to this will remember Germany in those inflation days, and it's coming. Don't you worry. You can't go on with this quantitative easing and printing while the presses are going red hot. This paper is less valuable than lavatory paper. It's coming. Better keep some lavatory paper. Don't bother with these bills. Silver and gold and anything that has, real wealth retaining value where you should be looking these days. We are in the final stages of an extremely corrupt financial system, period. And nobody can argue that. That I'm dogmatic on. That is it. I've been watching this for 20-odd years and making my own arrangements. Don't trust this system at all. They are going to bankrupt the whole thing. And it's like pushing a tanker at full speed onto the rocks. And we're very nearly there.
Yeah, well, I did a show, I think, 2 years ago about hyperinflation. And
It's mixed now. It's deflation, hyperinflation, stagflation. It's the whole lot. This is what gets people so confused. Some prices and elements are going to be deflating. Other foods and things are going to be inflating. Oil's going to be going crazy, particularly if they now attack each other in the Gulf. Mm-hmm. So our next drama could happen later this year. I mean, it's all absolutely... It's like, the potential of a vast sort of volcano about to erupt. But so long as people know that, and they know that they have their own purpose for being here, their own inner blueprint, as I see it, it's all an inner process. If we get lost in external projection, in fear, we really are lost. Mm-hmm. Each one, and everybody listening to this or seeing this or whatever, has a blueprint of a purpose on this planet.
Coming back to crop circles, more mundane question. There has been chat around that the military is doing crop circles. And you briefly told me that you have information that the military might indeed do that. Can you expand a little bit on that?
Well, last year I had a very good friend of mine who I trust, who was actually in an interview with a top military guy around here. And this area is, for those of your listeners who don't know, a military zone. Mm-hmm. It's interesting. Where crop circles come should be a military zone, mm-hmm. on top of Oxford University and the Illuminati. It's a really lovely mixture. And I can tell you, loaded. And I can also tell you that this area is where a lot of the very unpleasant arms trading this country indulges in, where the biological weapons are all made very near Stonehenge. So again, it's a perfect illustration of light and dark mixing together because they have to. So these tourists come here from around the world to see me and say, "Oh, you live in paradise. What a wonderful place." And I say, wake up. Underground, right there, is probably one of the nastiest facilities in the world. Right underneath Stonehenge almost.
What facility would that
be? Down, and it's where all the biological experimentations are made, and this country's great exports are really nasty weaponry. Mm-hmm. Must remember that. This is a very warfaring nation. This is top of the list of warfaring with the Spaniards. Anyway, so this friend of mine talked to a military leader here, a commander, who said, yes, we do have the capacities now with lasers from satellites to mark patterns like that. And I think it's possible. I get the sense in some of these formations that they've become very harshly laid. And I'm not talking about men with planks stamping on things. That's not quite as harsh as I mean. I mean, really, as though the land is almost scorched, mm-hmm. and really broken at the bottom. If you've been in them for years, you can tell the difference. Mm-hmm. And there's a feeling like that about it. And so when I heard that information last year, I felt, yes, that makes sense, that some kind of laser technology which would really beat up the crop. Mm-hmm. That's what I feel. It's not really a living crop anymore, as it was in the early days when the first node was bent very often and the mm-hmm. formation was above the ground, about 6 inches or a foot above the ground. Now it tends to be very remarkable, not possible by man-made, but really flattened onto the earth, and I felt that was probably mechanical. But this man evidently said, and this is what's really funny about the whole thing, he said with a bit of a smile to this friend of mine, but the images we send up for projection down are not always the ones that come down. So that gives a nice little additional flavour. So in all this mixture, the higher sort of consciousness is still kind of controlling events. So the military is only a mid-stage, of course, as always, and they know that. We have helicopters flying over this area continually, as you will have seen. Oh, yeah. There have even been attacks on crop circle people and people jumping out of helicopters and rounding people up at night, and there's been a lot of hassling going on. So the military and all the institutions in this country that are actually very frightened by this phenomenon because it's beyond their control, mm-hmm. are all fiercely negative, put out huge disinformation and take a lot of trouble to minimize this, because it's a one area where there is a higher communication which they can't control. That's mm-hmm. very important to understand. So all the police, all the politicians, all the newspapers, most of the farmers, just about everybody is against. And I can say on this program that if it hadn't been, and I'm not particularly blowing my own trumpet, but if it hadn't been for locals who were in on it at the beginning, who knew it was important, who had been brought here by various forces to be part of it, and who, like myself, have taken these images. In the early days, not on computer. This was standing in photocopy shops in blazing heat in Sydney, Australia or something, so that evening I'd get 100 of these primitive black and white images to audiences back in the early 90s. That's how we worked. Now it's easy. You can turn on to Crop Circle Connector, press a few buttons, and you've got more than I have here in England. You can see it all day by day. So we really worked for it at the beginning, and people took the trouble to fly and to photograph privately. There were no public funds. Research was done, very detailed research in laboratories was done to test the energy influence on the crop affected against what wasn't affected. And you could see one of my favorite slides that I have in my presentation is a blown up microscopic image of wheat that had been affected against wheat that hadn't. And everybody in the audience just gasps. The light infusing the energy one is just such a contrast to the other. So years ago we had the proof that it was energy. And people around this area have then made calendars which we've sent around the world. They've travelled the world lecturing about it. It's not my main subject. I think I've told that to you before. I mean, I'm in this area for many different reasons, but it kind of proves my other theories about the area, because crop circles look like a great cosmic finger pointing down here saying, watch this space. That's why I'm interested. It proves other things that I'm interested in. But a lot of people who are dedicated just to crop circles have made the phenomenon for the world against huge opposition. What they would have liked is just a complete forgetting about it, total trashing of it. That's why they paid Doug and Dave, these outrageous men, one of whom has died. I believe it was the Daily Express. I think the money in those days was £10,000 to be their disinformation agents. That's how it started. And these idiots were standing up there, even on nights when maybe 5 or 6 came in over quite an area and complex, that they had been around all night doing them all. I mean, how dumb can the human public be to accept such nonsense? But they are, and most humans won't even bother. In this area in England, you'll find most people are totally cynical, and any guest like you coming into a B&B, they'll say, oh, you're crazy coming all the way over here, and our kids make them, or all sorts of ridiculous things. Hedgehogs make them. I mean, I've heard unbelievable theories, and they'll all buy that rather than even take the trouble to get up and sometimes walk 50 yards into a field where you can see it from your window to go and experience it for themselves. They won't even do that.
Yeah, that's one of the things that really convinced me that this phenomena is something else is when I first walked in a crop circle in 2002, just on the opposite of Stonehenge. It was this six-fold formation with those, and I walked in and I could feel something. It was very similar to a shiatsu treatment or something like that. And
that was the fractal, wasn't it? The 3-armed fractal.
No, it was a six-fold.
Oh, six.
I think.
But fractal. Because the great one opposite Stonehenge that was a great proof, because many people
said
yes, not the Julia set.
No,
right, okay, yeah.
The Julia set, I think it was 90s.
That was earlier.
It was earlier.
Maybe earlier.
No, but in any case, I mean, I walked into the circle and I could feel that something, if you go over the border of the circle, is different, and I can't put my finger really on it, and I know it's subjective, but what do you think is the mechanism that this can happen? How, you know what I mean? I mean, how is this possible? How is this energy stored there? Do you have any idea? It's
interesting when there's nothing like stones to store it in, because you go to somewhere like Stonehenge or Callanish or all these sites I visit around the world, and you get dowsing rods out, and they are held in the granite, in the crystal in the granite. That's actually where it's held, and you can douse those stones, and you can douse the aura of those stones. And somewhere like Stonehenge, when you have a private invitation to go into the middle, you can feel the energy as you walk through the ring of stones, both in and out, a change of temperature. You don't have to be very, sensitive to feel those differences. So that's on earth energy sites, power sites, and so on. These places they put the crop circles are never random. That's all I can say. They're always on ley lines. They're always near power sites. They're near long barrows. They're near, in this area, Silbury Hill. They're near Avebury. Most of them come, and white horses.
Yeah.
We have many white horses marked on the hillsides, and they have power. Most of them are within sight of that. So they're somehow laying them, I think, on a grid, on lines, which will enhance whatever energy is brought in. But how it's stored, I don't know, but I can tell you that even after the harvest, there's even been examples after ploughing of the fields, that grass has grown back, or a new crop, showing the same formation again before the rest grows. Now, little men with planks can't do that. So somehow it is stored in the soil. In this area, we do have. It's important, I understand, that there's water, underground water. Yeah. That helps. And we do also have a lot of stone on our fields called flint here.
I've seen that.
You know, I'm only guessing here. I'm not an expert in that. But the combination of all those things, energy lines, power sites, underground water, and special stones and things like that on the surface and in the soil might account for it.
By chance, I met Lucy Pringle today in the crop circle that came down, I think, yesterday or so. And she is very interested in the healing effects of crop circles. So what we just talked about, that you feel good. You feel happy when you go into a crop circle. I mean, how crazy is that? It's just flattened crop, but obviously it's not. And she witnessed healing effects of the Windmill Hill crop circle, temporary effects where a woman who had problems with her hands, and she thinks that it's electromagnetism or magnetic fields, something along those lines, that is the means of transmission of this.
I think that's possible because the ley lines will carry that energy as well. You'll have healings on ley lines. I mean, the church knew that. Yeah. The Christian church, took over all the pagan sites and put the altars of their old churches on crossing ley lines. So they know when you knelt down in front of the priest, there'd be an automatic uplift of energy anyway. So, that's been known, and miracles have occurred as a result of that. So it is a combination of electromagnetic energies, radiations of various sorts and descriptions. That there's a lot going on. And I've known people have wonderful healings and get over jet lag from America just by lying for 15, 20 minutes or something after a transatlantic flight and feeling completely restored. So all these things are definitely there. And there's an animation about people. I mean, I said yesterday I had 23 people in 4 formations, and I do this every year twice. I give two days. And the energy between people is so fantastic. Oh, yes. It becomes a wonderful exchange on many subjects, and people are really vibrant, and they're alive, communicating, channeling, healing. It's all happening. Yeah.
I've witnessed that so often, that you get into those crop circles and everyone talks with everyone else, and it's just...
And the synchronicity. I mean, one year I had a woman come up to me and we had a long chat, and she said, "Now, you'll probably be able to help me, but I'm told I need to find somebody called Simon Peter Fuller." So we had to meet. It was all perfect. And time and again, I have found wonderful synchronicities. Just the people. Again, yesterday there's a woman working in Sri Lanka where I do a great deal of work. And we just got talking in the crop circle, and she even knows people I do. She's on a project I'm involved with. We had to meet. The synchronicities are also wonderful. So the whole thing is working at a different frequency level in the matrix. That's all, the only way I can describe it. It's another world. When you step in there, it is a temporary temple. It's like you stepped into a spacecraft. But those are what I call the genuine ones. The man-made fakes, are flat.
It's also interesting that you mentioned temperature, because when we entered the first crop circle, a friend of mine who is traveling with me, Walter, he said that he feels there is more heat here. He really felt, and I was kind of saying, well, it's the sun, and maybe it's there's an effect there. But do you think that?
Well, you want to keep jumping from the circle to outside and keep testing that across and testing it with your hands and everything else. One wonderful hand test is putting your palms down on the ground for a few moments and then watching the incredible blotched effects. You ever tried that?
No.
That's just straight radiation from the ground. You put it on there and your whole hand, what we call mottled. You know the expression mottled? All red and white.
Okay.
Patches. The whole thing becomes, that's not patchy now, the whole thing becomes mottled patches.
Okay.
That's probably heat and radiation. So again, individuals, some will be affected more, some will be less. You can take some people who are very insensitive to amazing places where everybody else is tingling and that person won't get it. Mm-hmm. It's like seeing UFOs. You can have 5 or 6 people and one in the group will see it. It's all vibrational calibration of where you're spinning, where you're vibrating at a particular time and level as to what you can relate to and what you feel. Okay. It's very subtle.
It is.
And you and your friend could be on slightly different frequencies, and that could answer for it.
Yeah. Well, I felt the heat, but I just had a different idea in my mind about it. So, but I have to tell him tonight that he might be totally right, and I was totally wrong.
No idea. Well, there isn't a right and wrong even in it. I think it's because of the different frequencies, there are going to be different experiences. I'm not a great one for righting and wronging about anything in life, actually. I've given up on that. Because if you stand in one corner, everything else will look a certain way, and somebody else standing somewhere else will see things differently. You know, I mean, there are certain things that you better not do in life because they're against the law. But by and large, I feel the whole thing is a program unfolding that has its place. Mm-hmm. Even if it's not that desirable or that pleasant, because our lives are like that, and we have incidents in our lives which we're not too proud of, but on the other hand, I feel they had to be. So right and wrong is blurred for me. I'm not too heavy on that one.
Okay. Getting back to this season, what do you think have been the highlights so far this year?
Well, the most important thing this year was that almost no formations came into the area where thousands have come, which is where we're sitting now in the Alton Barnes Avebury area, which for me was quite difficult because I'm not used to travelling far with my clients. That's very inconvenient. I want them all in the fields where I can get at them. And until last week, I almost had to cancel yesterday because the one I did a month ago, I was travelling, I think, 30 miles to get to one of them. So Isabel Kingston, where I live, has said that the energy here has now so developed that it's actually blasted them further afield. And we have had them all over the country this year. So that's been quite important. Now they have come just before the harvest, a certain number here. But we shall have rather a poor season in a way in the old area. It'll be less intense, so it's gone wider. Otherwise, I've been travelling a great deal. I haven't really been in touch with people too much about the interpretations of them yet. We tend to do that at the end of the season. Francine Blake is very good at that, who runs Wiltshire Crop Circle Study Group, and she has a summary meeting usually by about October. And then we begin to assess all the symbols, what relationships they might have had. Usually in a season there are themes. Things come in certain themes. We've had animal themes. We've had the wormhole theme, I think 4 years ago, which is that scientific term for the movement between interdimensional space. Wonderful 3D wormholes, I think 4 or 5 in one season. Crosses, all kinds of different symbols. The seasons often, not always, have themes that they're obviously trying to communicate. Fractals have been very important. The Vesica Piscis has been one of the most important of all, which I used personally in my own work. The symbol of duality and the overlap in the middle, which is the passageway into non-duality and into unity consciousness, as I would call it. So that is important now because we're moving from the old times of intense duality, as you say, right and wrong, male and female, left and right, positive, negative, and all that stuff, into a blending. The next stage on planet Earth for humans living here will be breatharian, androgynous, psychic and silent, and air-based bodies, not water.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's coming. That's the new route race. Okay. Not tomorrow.
Now,
a little bit down the track.
Staying with that, I mean, as you already said, I mean, crop circles are not your main venue, although you know a lot about them, and you work with them for 25 years, which is really astonishing. So you worked with them almost from the get-go.
When they got, I would say, complicated, so from 87, because there were some simple ones, as we've said in the early days, but when the images started getting really complicated, yes, we've been in it from the beginning.
But it's not your main subject, just one aspect of your work. And when I understand you correctly, your main interest lies in the evolution of the human race and how it would unfold and how it can be, you know, guided in a certain direction. Is that correct?
I think that's probably one way of describing it. It's a very critical moment. I've had my Nadi palm leaf reading done in India, which is a most amazing experience because actually, in my understanding now, which is what I call non-duality and Advaita, all is already known. That's where a good reading can already tell you a lot about your life. That's the whole point of it. And there are beings who come from the future who can tell us exactly where we're at and what's going to happen. So I believe we're on a kind of an unfolding program, each one of us, to the last detail. So my palm leaf reading was that this soul that is this entity called me at this moment, but I don't care about a name very much, has been incarnated on the planet at times of great changes, when certain spiritual initiatives have come in, the Buddha, the Christ, and various others, and has been close to that consciousness to kind of work it in to the planet and the people in many lifetimes following. And this is probably the culmination, and many, many souls will have come back now at the culmination of all those eons of work for this great moment. This is the great shift on this planet. This is a planet going into ascension, the ascension process, into another frequency, with those on the planet in human form who can make the jump, or who are destined to make the jump. Not a judgment. There'll be those that are, those that aren't. All consciousness survives the body. There's no such thing as death. Everything will land at the vibrational levels it needs to. We're all within oneness, but there are many, many levels of oneness. Diversity within unity, we call it. There are different levels. That's all it is. So no judgment. People are where they are. They'll go where they need to go. But on this particular planet, at this particular time, we have what is called an ascension process into a new frequency, which I understand now is an emanation of the galactic core, which is a black hole, we understand, which is like a heart that beats. And it makes a lot of sense. So in that spiral galaxy of the Milky Way, on which we're on the outer edge, every 10,000, 12,000 years, a pulse comes out. Every 26,000 years, you know, the great cycle of the 26,000 years of the zodiac. There's a pulse that comes out and affects everything. Every single planet in this universe, in this solar system rather, is going through change.
That's right. I mean, you have global warming. Global climate change, let's call it. Yeah. Because your exhaust pipe will not be affecting what's going on Mars and Jupiter right at this moment. So let's cut all that nonsense out about the carbon stuff. Yes, no, I'm not talking about the carbon stuff.
Well, let's reduce our carbon by all means. I mean, that's just good housekeeping. But it has nothing to do with the overall changes that are going on. And we need to watch the Illuminati banker cabal again at their tricks, trying to tax us for carbon again, because this is now going to radically reduce the income, certainly of the middle class, and going to cause chaos. And it's not proven science at all, so it's nonsense. There will be climate change, yes, colder and hotter and whatever else, but it's caused by solar radiation and by emanations from the core of the galaxy. That's where the real truth comes from, and we can't avoid it. We simply have to adapt to it. And human beings will adapt. And that's why I'm saying now what we talked about just now, about what human beings will become here, because they will adapt. We will not carry this old body in its old ways anymore, not those living on this planet. That will go elsewhere. So my work, in a way, is to focus perhaps all those initiatives, the Buddhist, the true Christ mission, which has nothing to do with Christianity, which was a creation in Rome 300 years afterwards, and has led to rivers of blood and total chaos, and is about to come down in a heap as a result of organised paedophilia, which has been organised from the top end, and which the human race will not accept. We're very near the end of the Vatican now. It's got one more pope to go. St. Malachi gave the prophecies. There's one more. He's black, and he's going to be called Peter, and the judgment of Rome will be in the twinkling of an eye, as they say. It'll be very quick, probably a volcano, and the whole thing will be over. The next stage is nothing to do with religions, nothing whatever. But my work is to talk this way, to bring people into an expanded consciousness in preparation, and also, very, very importantly, to work on the earth. Because, as I've explained to you just now, we're moving on a grid from the old, what is called, this gets complicated here in Greek, the old icosododecahedron crystal grid system, which is the network of energy around the planet, will transform into the new double pentadodecahedron, which is the flower of life, the Christ grid as it's called. So the subtle energy foundation on this planet is changing, and crop circles are very central to that.
In which way?
In the acupuncture points of the planet. This is one of them, Avebury. They call this the global heart chakra, this area of Western Europe, particularly here in the west of England. The heart of Mother Earth, of Gaia. Couldn't be more important, pumping the energy out here. So crop circles coming right into the heart of the planet. Acupuncture points, changing the vibrations, may have nothing to do with humans at all. Could just be shifting consciousness within the planet. Some people put up that theory. So it doesn't matter what humans think. Not at all. We're bypassed. Nice if we join the party, but we may not. Doesn't matter. Okay. So acupuncture points in the grid of the planet, changing these frequencies, and by going to the ancient power sites, you become a vehicle, as it were, particularly in the heart. It's not about the head and dowsing and we'll change this line, we'll do that from a head kind of willpower. It's nothing to do with that. It's synchronicity, having a love for the earth and for creation and for each other, and taking a group in that energy to the most famous sites in the world, which we have in all our countries. You have them in Austria and Germany, the Extenstein. There are many, many, many places where groups gather, and always have, for positive and negative purposes, of course. But now to go to re-strengthen our connection. And that's what this group in this area was called together, quite mysteriously, in about 1985. Some 50 of us were dragged from our lives all over, including Isabel, who I keep talking about, all doing different work. We were all suddenly pulled down here together. We didn't even know each other. Then over the next years we got to know each other. Spirit guidance came in that we were reactivating the landscape here. We were connecting with what the ancients had done on the land, which was to place ancient temple sites, ancient node points, to represent certain constellations on the land, starscapes. And they had worked with those, and the consciousness from those planets, from those constellations on the land. That's how the ancients worked, with the bones of the ancestors, honouring all things, all dimensions. Then we went into a period of gross materialism. It's like going down a U shape. And now we're coming out of that gross materialism because the planet can't take it anymore. It's very simple. We've gone far enough. And now we're coming out again at a point where these ancient sites need to be reopened and humans reconnected to the more subtle understandings of life on Earth. So our work here has been to prepare this landscape where we're sitting, where most of the crop circles have come, to prepare it, according to spirit guidance, to receive probably this great phenomenon, and also to attract millions of people from around the world to come and visit these sites again.
And that's happening every year.
And that is a fact. 20 years ago, 25 years ago, it wasn't even protected at Avebury or Stonehenge. You could walk in there, you could have a picnic, there was no charges, there was nothing. I've
been here in 82, I think.
Well, you know how it was, so that's proof. So since then, and we had this clearly through the guidance, these stones and these sites will call to humanity, and people will come here in large numbers. It's 1 million a year now coming to Stonehenge, about the same to Avebury. We're not a tourist area. We don't have thousands of hotels. As you know, with the difficulty getting beds, it's getting very difficult. Mm-hmm. But we had mystics in this country who knew that in these days many would come and make their connection with this sacred landscape. And this is not the only part of the world. Every land has its energy points, its node points, places of power that have been known about, which are now calling to people to come again and connect in a very simple way, singing and dancing, picnicking, nothing heavy. Really important. This is not a heavy energy. This is light, joyful, linking with nature and natural laws. And when you do that, nature responds in the most incredible miracles. And my book is essentially about the fantastic journeys around the planet, working in that energy, and the miracles, quite frankly, that have happened as a result of that, because this is in tune with the next stage, which is a new foundation for the planet Earth of energy, and no old institution will survive the new energy. They will all fall, all of them. And we build the new earth, the new heaven, the new earth, the new Jerusalem, whatever you like to call it, on a new foundation. And that foundation is an energy grid. And that's the work that I'm primarily involved in.
What do you think is coming down the next couple of years?
That's a really difficult one, because we're not in the business of frightening people either. And that's why throughout this interview I've been trying to hint, as you can see, that I'm trying to get people to go within themselves and not go lose themselves in external projection. Yeah. I think it's terribly important, because these are going to be extremely challenging times, probably the most challenging this planet and the people on it have ever known. We're 6.5 billion people now, mainly unconscious, which is not a good start. And we're about to go through a major dimension shift. Now, this information is being beamed through channels, through crop circles, through a variety of different ways for many years now. We've been warned about this. The prophecies, the revelations texts in the Bible, if you'd had the real one, we've actually, well, I can't go into that, it's too long a story, but in that book, if you read it, you'll find a missing section of Revelations that was taken by the Roman Church, that was brought back directly into our group on computer by spirit, no human intervention, printed out, that actually again gives warning about these times. Mm-hmm. They call it the second coming of Christ consciousness. They call the end of the religions. They call it the time when the divine feminine would emerge again and balance with the masculine within. This is not women taking over in feminism. That's absolutely not the energy. That's the most resistible energy on the planet. The divine feminine is irresistible, staying in feminine energy, and has all the power. But it's bringing them together. That ancient text talked about all those things, the changes that would come on the planet. Everything is contained in there that was taken out by the Roman Church. Of course, 2,000 years ago, they didn't want humanity focusing on that. Mm-hmm. So that we've had. So we've really had a most amazing kind of, as a group, as Holistic World Vision, a background of these times and what's coming. Well, as to what is coming, it's difficult to say. I mean, we could well have rising waters, which will make a very big difference to the planet. I mean, 20, 30 foot of more water will put most of the world's population is living by the sea. I don't think I need to say any more. Mm. That's going to be one of them. Tectonic plates are on the move. Volcano chains will start to take off. Yes, there'll be massive change. Okay. And it's terribly important people to know who are in the awareness kind of zone. There are an awful lot of people who will just be in fear and shock, on top of which a huge amount of information will suddenly start becoming available to show you that history and everything we've been told is basically rubbish. That's not going to be easy. I can see some people who've lived a life believing in their church, believing in their politicians. Their circuits are just going to explode. It's all rubbish. In English, we call it his story, history. It's convenient. Mm-hmm. His story. Yes. The conqueror changed it to his version. It's not the truth at all. Heresy, which is another English word, and we play on the words a bit in this language, we call her say. So whenever she said anything, she was immediately chopped off and strangled. The feminine was always burnt as witches or whatever else. Mm-hmm. So we have history and her say basically everything we've been told about wars, about 9/11, about all the terror attacks, about everything else. The whole thing is absolute rubbish. And we have to turn it all upside down completely to see the truth. It's smoke and mirrors world. Mm-hmm. That alone is going to stagger people when they see the lies they've been told and how they've been manipulated, how wars have been fought with all these people we honour in our war memorials, all for bankers' greed. That's enough shock to kill many people. Imagine their lives. So we've got all that coming. You've got earth changes coming. You've got incredible changes and stuff coming from above. So we hear from the Hopi prophecy. The Hopis have given a good rundown. The Mayan calendar has given a good rundown. We haven't been without our guidance. It's been given for those who are aware, those who are meant to work with and access it. But at the end of the day, I have to say myself that it's very important to come to an understanding beyond the main fear that the human race has, which is death. That, if you look at it, is the only real fear underlying everything. There isn't anything else. We know that we are pure consciousness and nothing else. We have an illusionary kind of body that we navigate this physical world with, and we have a temporary personality called an ego, and all these dissolve at so-called death. We are pure consciousness, which is eternal, which is part of oneness, part of the divine. Inseparable, rock solid. And bodies come and go. And in these days, plenty of bodies will go. That's all one can say. But could you really, standing as an individual with an ego, and I travel the third world all the time, and see the horrors of the lives of at least 60% of the people on this planet in misery and starvation? We sit here in England and you in Austria and whatever in a very, very high standard of living. Unbelievable. Come with me to India, to rural India, to Sri Lanka. I'll show you places that you couldn't even believe. And these people are eking an existence in sewage tubes and, just the most revolting conditions. Would you wish to keep them in that on the planet? We have made on this planet through the banking distortion and the way the money has been siphoned through usury and fractional reserve banking. You now see it. This is the prophecy of the 12 families who are worth multi-trillions owning the wealth of the world. They have sucked it out of the general purse. That's what was prophesied to happen. It is what has now happened. And all these people are suffering as a result of that. If this planet and the plan had been different, had been able to share the wealth, every single being on this planet would have had enough for a reasonable survival. Every single being. That's fact. Absolute fact. It's only through the greed and the way the system works that we have deprived the vast majority of a fair chance at all in life. But it's now too late. And very large numbers may well leave, unless some extraordinary miracle happens, or their entities land, and I'm not into all that. I don't know about that. Many people talk about various ET fleets arriving and taking people off and doing I don't know what. I'm not into any of that.
So you think a lot of people are going to die?
They'll lose their bodies. I don't believe in death.
Yeah,
it's important.
I understand, but
yes.
From our perspective,
yes. Bodies will go. Bodies are going at this very moment. I mean, you only have to look now at extreme weather in the northwest of Pakistan. We have unprecedented floods. We have unprecedented fires going on in Russia, which has devastated the wheat crop, which is going to affect us all. And forest areas, Australia last year, unbelievable fires. We have these extremes. The coldest winter, I don't know how it was in Austria. I was luckily in Sri Lanka, but this was indescribable here. I was in Sweden last week, and it was, minus 30 for many weeks. It's all moving in all directions. And it's going to be very, very testing and challenging. So it's already happening. It's already unfolding. It'll simply intensify.
In closing, what do you think is the most important thing for people to realize, and for people, what is the most important thing for them, for what is coming, to get through it, however?
Well, my understanding in my own philosophy of non-duality is, as I've said earlier on, is that we are all on a path that is destined. That's the first thing. Now that upsets people because immediately the ego jumps in and says, no, it's not. I'm an ego. I can choose. I've got free choice. I've got free will. It's a nice idea, but when you actually look at your life and you're scrupulously honest about it, you will find that life happens to you. It really does. You know, that lover that you met, that partner that you had, did you get out of bed that morning and know that? That happened. It all unfolds as it needs to. That's the so-called good and the bad. No idiot would choose a terrible illness or a car accident, but they happen. It's all part of an unfolding program. And my own philosophy is that the entire thing can already be foreseen in the very good readings, like the Nadi palm leaves and everything else, so that at this stage there is no effort to be made. Life for me unfolds moment by moment. Last week I had no idea I was going to meet you, probably even 2 days ago, that we'd be doing this. It wasn't planned, it wasn't in my thing at a conscious level, and yet here we are, here we sit, unfolding. I have no idea what's going to happen next. I don't care what's going to happen next. I trust the process. I know after an extraordinary life that I couldn't have chosen all the amazing varieties of things that have happened in my life, the fantastic world journeys. Where did the money come for all that travel, I'd like to know. It's all a miracle. It's all a blueprint, and it's all unfolding as it needs to, when it needs to. Now, I ask people to look seriously into their own lives, not listen to me, to see whether that philosophy wouldn't make sense in their own lives. Because when it does, it's what's called in the East Advaita. It is the path of enlightenment, of self-realization, of Christ consciousness, whatever you like to call it, which is actually the total connection and final connection to the unity that you are. The divine, if you like to call that, the universal consciousness, it doesn't matter what it is. It's the end of separation, and it's the end of the search. Everybody is looking for oneness. They're looking for themselves. But what they didn't realize, it was always on the end of their nose. And their eyes overlooked it, because you can't see the end of your nose unless your eyes are on swivels. So you have carried the truth of oneness always. And this journey in duality was just temporary. So the next stage, as such, there isn't such a thing as time and space. Actually, in the next dimension, all is now, all is the present moment, all is here and now. There is nothing else. The next stages, so-called, will unfold according to the blueprint that has been set, and will unfold without any deviation. Some may lose a body, some may do this, some may do that. It'll be exactly as it needs to, as 6.5 billion souls come to a conclusion. This is like the last act of a great play. All the players from many civilizations, all those entities, from Atlantis, from Egypt, we're all here, we're all back on stage now. All the karma of those years, all the energies being balanced, the whole thing is back for the final, the grand finale. And then the curtains go down on this planet, on that, the end of that old extreme duality of the third dimension. And this planet moves into a new frequency.
Moving in circles, going round and round, but head still looping, if it stay down. I want to know what you've done. Did all this change your mind? The blind go different ways.
Sie hörten eine weitere Ausgabe von Crop FM. Weitere Sendungen zu Themen am Tellerrand der kollektiven Wahrnehmung finden Sie auf der Website von Crop FM www.cropfm.at. Ich danke fürs Zuhören und fürs Interesse. Bis zum nächsten Mal. Macht es gut.